Hi guys, thanks for coming to my channel, Billy Reacts, where I share my opinions and my reactions to all things book and music related. If you like book and music related reaction videos and you're interested in seeing that content, then hit the subscribe button below. I'll greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much. So today is going to be a book related video. I'm planning on doing my top 15 favorite books or series of all time. And that's going to include some standalones or some series that maybe just have one book out so far, or series that have been over with for years. So I'm just going to let you know like my ranking and what I love about them, and a brief synopsis of what the book is about, and kind of list them in order from 15 to number 1.
Like the best series of all time.
So if you like the video, hit the like button and tell me what you think in the comments. Well, I hope you guys enjoy the video.
And subscribe, please.
So number 15 on my list is going to be The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. At first, I wasn't initially too interested in reading this. I was at the start, like I discovered it and I read about it on Goodreads, and then I even bought the first book, and then I bought the second book. But then my friend started reading it and told me about some things that I wasn't into, so it took me a while to read. But I found myself one afternoon like, you know, I don't know what I want to read, so let's try this. And it took me a couple chapters to get into the book, but once I did, like, it was really good. I think the storytelling was really rich. It's about the main character, Jude, is a mortal who was taken to fairyland by her parents' killer. So the start scene is that, and then it picks up 10 years later, and then you follow the life of Jude and her sisters as they have lived in fairy for 10 years. And so they're part of the society and they don't necessarily fit in, but I love some of the elements. There's some really good like underlying like political strength in the book. And I'm not talking like, oh, inserting your political opinion. I mean, like, the book is like a chess game and there's like this political feeling of it, like there's politics behind every action and every character. And so I definitely really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the first book a lot, and then the second book I enjoyed a little less, but still really decent. And so the third and final book, Queen of Nothing, comes out November 19th of this year, so I'm very stoked. So yeah, The Cruel Prince, pretty good. I rated both books 4 stars on Goodreads. Great writing style, great character development. There were just some things about the plot in the second that I enjoyed a little less than the first. So I would probably say the first was like a 4.3, and then the second was probably like a 3.9. Still rounds up to a 4. So number 14 is Legend by Marie Lu. And Legend it's a shorter series, like the books are shorter, but Marie Lu is probably my favorite. There are definitely authors who I enjoy their work more, but I think Marie Lu and the versatility that she has to flip from genre to genre to genre and still pump out really, really good novels makes her a really dangerous weapon for the publishing world and the writing world. So Legend follows the characters Day and June in a dystopian world where the United States has fallen. There's the Republic and there are the colonies. And so there's a test that you have to take, and if you fail the test, you die. There's also this thing where they're like, at the beginning of the book you think it's going to be something like the plague because they're Xing up doors. There's a sickness going around, and the main character Day is wanted. He can climb up the side of buildings. He's like this outlaw. And then June is on the side of the government. Like, her brother's a police officer and she's like a prodigy.
Wordplay, that's the second book.
She's a prodigy in her field and she gets into trouble sometimes. It's dual point of views, and it's the story of them and how they meet and cross paths. And then there's a lot of back and forth and undercover, and it's just really, really well written, and it will tear your heart out. And I rated all 3 books 4s. They were probably consistently 4.5s, just shy of 5 stars. So definitely read Legend by Marie Lu. It has 3 books: Legend, Prodigy, and champion. So, that's definitely a really good book. Number 13 is going to be The Crown's Game and Crown's Fate duology by Evelyn Skye. I absolutely adored this duology. It's the first duology that I have ever read. And so when I first started it, I read it on Audible, and it took me a minute to get into the narrator. He's phenomenal once you get used to him, but I also read on 2-speed, and sometimes even faster depending on the narrator, and so his accent was harder to understand at that speed, so I actually had to slow it down a little bit. Like, it's real life Russia, but I think it's supposed to be alternate because obviously there's no magic in real Russia, but it's Russia set in, I think, the 18th century, and the idea of it is the magic of Russia is born into one or sometimes two spell wielders, chosen ones. And so if it ever does come to two, there has to be like a tournament, and Russia and the Tsar will determine who is the better magic user, who is the better like spellcaster, and the magic will leave killing the loser and all go into one. So you have these two people, and they're both chosen, and they have to complete these tasks and kind of outdo each other in their magic, whether it be awe-inspiring or showing how clever they are. But then you also have Pasha, who is the Tsar's son, and he has a knack for dressing up as a peasant and going out and hiding. And I love that so much. And there's definitely a lot of really strong characters, and there are some really good twists and some things like magic building and the magic system. Like, I really love how it is, and I think Evelyn Skye did a really, really good job, and she's just all around great because I also read her Circle of Shadows, the first book, and I'm so excited for the second and final one. She does duologies. I'm more into longer series, but I can enjoy a good duology. But yeah, The Crown's Game was phenomenal. I gave them 4.5 stars each. Number 12 is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston.
And oh my god, this book. Okay,
So in Red, White, and Royal Blue, in this alternate reality, we have a female president, and her son Alex works on her re-election campaign. Well, he doesn't like the Crown Prince of England. So at this public sort of political thing, there's this altercation thing that causes them to have a publicity stunt friendship. So I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it is literally male between the first son of the United States and a crown prince. It has a presence of texts and emails instead of face-to-face communication a lot, and it was magical and beautiful, and I love it. And I don't think that there's a second book. I think it's just a standalone, but it made such an impact on me, and I loved it, and I finished it. It's a long book. I mean, it's not that long, but it's a pretty hefty book, and I finished it in 24 hours. So number 11 is Twilight by Stephenie Meyer, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that. I've always loved Twilight ever since I first read it. I remember when the movie was first starting to come out, my friend had checked it out from the library, and I think it was like September, and Twilight came out in November. And so my friend checked it out from the library and was talking to me. I had gone over to her house, and we used to sit and talk on her porch swing, and she was actually telling me about the book she was reading, and she said she was reading Twilight, and I was really interested in it, and she said she was done, so she let me read it, and she said it had to be done by Thursday because she had to return it to the library. She gave it to me on Monday night. I gave it to her Wednesday afternoon after school. So I read Monday night, all day Tuesday, and then Wednesday at school, and I finished it, and I loved it. And then my friend got it for Christmas, the whole box set, and she read it first, and then I read it. So I just loved it, and I get that it didn't age well at certain aspects, and I get that Edward Cullen can be annoying, and that he is very problematic in the first book. I actually just did a reread of it this year, and I found when I was a teenager, Breaking Dawn was my least favorite. But as an adult, Twilight was. I found Edward very cringy and very problematic, I guess, in the first book. And he kind of felt that way in the third book as well, a little bit, but not too bad. But there were things I noticed about the first book that I really didn't enjoy. And so I moved the first book down to, I think, 3 stars. And Twilight was always a 5-star, 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 5-star for me. And so I read the rest of it and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed New Moon. I really enjoyed Eclipse. And surprisingly, the book that I always said I didn't like, I really enjoyed Breaking Dawn. So I know that there's a lot of hate for Twilight, and I know that I'm in the minority here because I've noticed that fan base disappeared quicker than anything I've ever seen. That is the definition of a fad, because Twilight was everywhere. It was, you could not go a class period. I was in high school. I was sophomore year when the movie came out. So you could not go a school day without hearing 10 plus people talk about Twilight. Everyone had the books, everyone watched the movies, the midnight premieres, everyone had the t-shirts, the hoodies, the purses, all the Hot Topic merch, like, and it just disappeared. Like, that fandom turned on itself so fast. Like, there was a point where I was gonna reread because something had happened to one of my books and it was damaged, so I was gonna buy a new set. And Amazon didn't even have any in stock. Like, what? Like, the biggest book series of my high school life isn't even in stock on Amazon. Amazon, the biggest place online to buy books. Like,
I was so confused. I was like, what?
So it was at 3, then it was at 7 a couple years ago, and now it's at number 11. So it feels like it just keeps dropping. So yeah, that Twilight's number 11. So number 10 is The Young Elites by Marie Lu, and this is my second Marie Lu series on this list. So I really liked The Young Elites. It's a dystopian fantasy, and I really liked how different it was. The main character, Adelina, the series starts with her in prison on the day of her execution, and she's rescued by a group of people called the Young Elites. And the whole concept behind this is, I think it was 10 years, maybe 15, so somewhere around a generation ago, disease wiped through the world like a plague, and all the adults who caught it died, but some of the kids survived, and they have like blemishes like scars or white hair or missing eye or just different things, and it labels them as malfectos, and a special group of them are the Young Elites, and they rescue Adelina. But I like the journey of it because it's not a straight arrow plot of a girl rescued and fights the bad guys. Like, there are things that you learn that evolve throughout the series that Marie Lu does a really good job with, of taking a character and not necessarily going down the road you would expect her to go. So I really liked the story arc for the characters, and I found the characters really, really well written, and I loved the third book. Like, it got so fantasy based for me, and it got so beautiful, and I really loved the story arc, and I loved the ending, and it was definitely one of my most memorable reads last year. So I definitely enjoyed that one. You guys should check that out. So number 9 is going to be the Grishaverse by Leigh Bardugo. Originally I was going to say Six of Crows, but I really think that the Grisha trilogy was just as good, honestly. I know a lot of people don't like it, and a lot of people don't like the main character and also one of the love interests, but I really loved it, and I started it like the end of last year. I started it, I think, late November, early December, and I think I finished the whole trilogy in like 4 days, so that's really fast for me. And it's set in a fantasy world, both the trilogy and the Six of Crows duology, which are both part of the Grishaverse, and it's supposed to be based, I think, loosely on Russia. A lot of things sound Russian, and a lot of cultures seem Russian a little bit to me, and I just think that Lee Bardugo writes some really, really, really good characters. I didn't see too much of the world building in the Six of Crows duology, but the Grisha trilogy definitely had a lot of really good world building. But the characters, I think that she is a character-driven author through and through. And so the Grishaverse follows Alina, who has a power that could change the world. And so it's about her journey defeating the people who don't want the world to change and don't want their control to end. And so it's really, really good. And I love the ending of it. And then the Six of Crows duology is pretty much like a fantasy-laced heist of ragtag misfits, a band of thieves, and like you have so many like just these layered characters and these awesome plots, and you fall in love with all of them, and it will rip your heart out, and it's just so good, and I would definitely recommend it any day. Number 8 is going to be A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I know this one gets a lot of hate, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. The first one, I even rated 5 stars, but I ended up moving it down to 4 because of how much better book 2 and 3 were. I took a little while to get into it. I think I got into it about at the 19 to 20% mark on Goodreads. But it follows Farah, who is a mortal who gets dragged into the fairy world of Prythian in a loosely based Beauty and the Beast retelling. So Farah pretty much is required to go to Prythian or lose her life for something that she did. And so there she learns of a curse, she meets people, she falls in love, and then it just culminates into this like brewing war, and there's so many fantastical elements, and I really liked some of the traveling into the different courts of the fairy court. So I definitely really liked the series, and I liked the magic, and I liked the fact that it's different than any romance that I've ever read. So I definitely like that, and I can see why some people wouldn't like it, but it was really, really good to me, and I really, really enjoyed it. So number 7 is going to be The Selection by Kira Cass, and it's a dystopian, and I, in the past, haven't been such a dystopian fan, but I decided to read it last July, I think, and it was because I was at my friend's house and she was watching a soccer game, and I didn't bring headphones, so I couldn't listen to an audiobook, and I'm a big audiobook fan, so I didn't have any way to listen to the book that I was actually reading. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll look on my Kindle Unlimited and find a book that I can borrow and read the ebook version, and I'll read my audiobook and the ebook version, so I'll read 2 books at once. So I started The Selection, and I think I read the first 4 chapters that day, and I was like immediately into it. Like, it really gave me the Hunger Games vibes, and I really liked the main character, which is always helpful. So The Selection is a dystopian world named Ilia, and pretty much there are 35 territories within Ilia. This is a country that used to be the United States, and whenever the child of the monarch is ready to find a wife, they hold a selection, which is they choose one woman from each territory to come to the castle and get to know the prince, and he gets to know them, and he eliminates them as he sees fit, and it's called The Selection. And pretty much his goal is to find his wife. With daughters, they marry them off in political alliances, so there's not usually a selection for princesses. But America is chosen from her territory and goes to the castle. I really, really like the prince. I know a lot of people don't like princely characters and the bland characters. They like the bad boys, but Maxon was my favorite character of the series. He was interesting, nice, good-hearted, kind, had an awesome backstory, and he was just a good person, and he had so much chemistry with all of the members of the book cast, like his family. Like he was a very chemistry-filled character, and he almost hopped off the pages with reality. Like he was so real to me, and the series was just really, really good for me. I wish that there would have been more books. I know the first 3 take place at the Selection, and then, spoiler free, the 4th and 5th book take place 20 years later. So it's going to be a different plot, and I really wish that there would have been a 4th book to bridge those, because I would have really liked to see more. And I really enjoyed it, and I think that it is neck and neck for my favorite dystopian series, and we'll get to the other one later. So number 6 is going to be The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and it usually sits in my top 5 pretty comfortably, but I've read some really good books this year. So it's so magical, and it's older. They're shorter books. They read a little younger, and it definitely is an older writing style. So I definitely understand that it's probably not for everyone, but just the whole magic of Narnia and everything. Like, I love The Silver Chair. It's my favorite. They're all so good, and they're so magical, and they're quick reads because they're not very long books. So it's definitely something that you could just sit and knock out in a week if you just read one a day. And they're just beautiful. And I've read them 2 times all the way through now, and I just really, really enjoy them. And I think that they are a book that everyone should read, or at least try to read. And they definitely do have religious parallels, so if that might be something that turns you off, maybe do a little bit more research. But I don't think that they're outstandingly blatant or anything, and that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me when people put politics or religion or anything like that in their books. I think that art is subjective, and you should be able to put whatever you want in your book. That's just who I am. So I love them, and I always will, and they'll always hold a really special place in my heart. So number 5 is going to be Divergent by Veronica Roth.
And oh my god.
Oh.
That book series had me on the floor, had me dying. Oh my god, guys. You guys do not even understand. So I tried to read this back in high school, and I think I got to like chapter 9, and for whatever reason I put it down and I wasn't like into it or whatever. I picked it up last year. It was my last book series of 2018, because when I finished it I couldn't read for like a month. So I went in expecting something Hunger Games, and I got so much more. I love the factions, and pretty much it's about Triss, who is an abnegation, which is like a selfless, very modest people, and pretty much it's a world where everyone is selected into 5 factions, and there comes a day, I can't remember what age it is, maybe 16, where you choose. It's the choosing day, and you have to choose. You have to take a test. It's kind of like an aptitude test, but with like virtual reality sort of, and it gives you results, and you're supposed to go by them, but you don't have to. So it's the day of Triss's choosing ceremony, and she takes her test and she gets her results, and then she chooses her faction. And so it's just a journey through this world, and there's all kinds of twists and turns and devastation and failure and love and heartbreak and murder, and it's so emotional for me even to this day.
I'm tearing up a little.
But yeah, Divergent wrecked me, and it definitely made my top 5. and it's really neck and neck for my favorite dystopian along with The Selection. So those are definitely my top 2 dystopians. So number 4 is going to be An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. And this was the first series that I read this year. And it was another one that I just became addicted to. I love the way that Sabaa Tahir writes tragically. It's like she does not hold any punches back. Like, she will destroy your life. So pretty much the scholars, which is a group of people, are tormented and ostracized by the rest of society. And they are raided and they're held at bay by these blades that cannot be cut. They can cut through rock. They're the strongest blades in the world, and it's some kind of technology that the Empire has. So Laia is sent on this journey when her brother is arrested for working with the rebels. And so she tries to find the rebels. And she ends up having to pretend to be a slave to go into the school where the masks, who are dangerous people who have literal silver masks that meld with their face, and they're like killers and like assassins almost, like they're really skilled in fighting, and they're sent to raid and kill and imprison, and they're just cruel, and that's what they're taught to be. So she has to go to the school where they're trained, and she has to pretend to be a slave to the commandant, which is the woman in charge of training the masks. And so she has to get information in order for the rebels to help her. So that's the easiest way I can describe to you what the series is like without it being spoiled. So it's this fantasy that is loosely based on the Roman Empire, and it's tragic, and it's so well written, and the world building is great, and Sabaa Tahir is just such a unique writer, and I would definitely recommend it. So number 3 was almost my number 2. Like, when I wrote down the list for this video, it was at number 2. But the more I got thinking about it, like, I really just couldn't move my number 2 down to number 3. So number 3 is going to be the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. And I know that there are a lot of controversial reviews on this one, and a lot of people don't like it. And a lot of people don't like Sarah J. Maas in general, but I fell in love with it immediately. I started with The Assassin's Blade, which is the bind-up of the novellas, and they all take place before the first book. So if you're going to read the series, I would definitely recommend that, because they do really get you into the character of Celaena. So pretty much the basis of the first Throne of Glass book is Celaena Sardothien used to be a renowned assassin, but she was arrested and sent to the slave mines of Endovier. Well, the king is holding a tournament to pick his next champion, his next assassin, the official assassin to the crown. So the prince, Dorian, chooses Celaena as his champion for the tournament. And it's with other thieves and assassins and liars, and so they all have to live at the palace and compete in different tournaments and different tasks to see who wins. And during that time, Celaena discovers that not everything is as it seems. She's having to recover from mistreatment and torture and slavery, so she's a little rusty at the start. And so it's just about her in the tournament, and then during the tournament people start turning up dead, and so Celaena has to try to figure out what's going on, who's killing these champions, before she ends up being the next one that's killed. It's a really good series, and I would say, as long as you don't hate the first book, I would keep going, just because at the end of the second book, I find that it turns into something more, and the series evolves into something you would never expect from the first book. So if you like it even a little, I would continue at least until the second book, And then if you're still not into it, then, you know, it's not for you probably. But by the end of the third book, it becomes what I consider a high fantasy. I consider this a high fantasy. But there are 7 books, 8 if you include the prequel novellas. There's 5 bound up in The Assassin's Blade. And my favorite character of all time is introduced in this series. So when you get to book 3, you'll meet Manon Blackbeard. And she is my favorite book character of all time. Like, nobody beats her. And I don't know why people don't like it, but I found Selena really rich and beautiful, and I found Dorian really well written and layered and just so interesting. And then Manon, like, oh my god. So definitely recommend Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. And like I said, if you're not sold but you didn't hate the first book, I would definitely continue to the second. And then after the second book, if you're still not sold, then I would probably say it's not for you. But it's one of those series that is constantly evolving into something else, which are the kind of series that I really love. I think that shows enormous strength in an author. So number 2 is going to be The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. And I started reading this freshman year of high school. So it's actually a funny story. In 6th grade, I started reading Harry Potter. And I got addicted to it. And I read it over and over and over and over again. And like, I think the last month of my freshman year in high school, so a full 4 school years later, my mom took me to the public library and was like, you're picking something out besides Harry Potter. So I ended up coming up with Eragon. And so I read it, and I was addicted to it. And I read the first 2 books, and the 3rd book came out later that year, I think in September of 2008. And so I burned through it as soon as I got it. I went to my grandmother's house and cleaned her house top to bottom, her bathroom, her kitchen, reorganized, scrubbed a toilet for the money for Brisingr. And I read it, and I burned through it, and then, of course, I had to wait the 3 years and I think 2 months that everyone else had to wait for Inheritance to come out. And when I got that, I bought it the day it came out, but my glasses had been broken a couple days before, and my contacts had been recalled, and I didn't know, so it gave me like severe pink eye, like my eyes look like Voldemort. So I had to wait to read it until I got my glasses a couple weeks later, and I think I read it in 3 days. And it's a big book. It's one of my biggest books that I read. So I devoured it at every chance, and I feel so personal to it, because the 3rd and 4th books I got to really work for in order to read, and I got to really appreciate the wait. So I would definitely recommend Inheritance by Christopher Paolini. It was a phenomenal series, and it's so rich, and the world building is so great, and it's not overdone, and there's elves and dwarves and dragons and witches and werecats, and I just really love it. So before I get to number 1, I wanted to discuss my honorable mentions. I have 5 of them. That way it rounds out to exactly 20 books that I'm talking about. So my first honorable mention is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. And the narrator is really, really good on Audible. So I would definitely recommend that. So my second honorable mention is going to be The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And this was the first dystopian I ever read. It's like the most popular dystopian that's out there. And I've kind of cooled off on it in recent years, but I'm overdue for a reread. So we'll see how that goes. So my third honorable mention, I didn't want to put it on my top 15 because there's only been 1 book, so I want to be able to see if the series stays good, but Stolen Time by Danielle Rollins. I read this I think, a week after it came out, and I read it in about 24 hours, and it's time travel, and it's dystopian, and it is awesome, actually. So my fourth honorable mention is Circle of Shadows by Evelyn Skye. It's another one that only has one book out, so I didn't want to put it in my actual list. From the synopsis, it sounded kind of similar, and I don't know why, because now when I read it, I don't see the similarities. But the synopsis originally sounded similar to her other series, The Crown's Game, so I was like a little worried that she was just gonna rewrite it with different characters pretty much. But it ended up being its own thing and completely different, and I love the two entities equally, almost. But I have to see what the other side of this duology is going to look like before it can make it into my top series. But it definitely has top series material. So my last honorable mention is the Immortal series by Alice and Noel. Back in high school, after I read Twilight, I went through this like paranormal romance, which is what I call it. Some people call it supernatural romance or supernatural young adult or whatever. But I went through this phase where that's what I wanted to read. And I borrowed Evermore from my friend. And I read it and I really liked it. And then I borrowed the second one. And then I borrowed the third one. And that was all that was out at the time. And so I bought the rest of them on my own. So those are my honorable mentions. And now let's get to number one. So, number one, the best series of all time, my favorite series, the series that I could reread over and over and over and over and over again, because I did for 4 years in high school and middle school, Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I know this is a really cliche favorite series, but this series got me into reading itself. And this series got me into writing. And I owe the fact that I love writing to two people. I always enjoyed making up stories. When I was younger, those ideas and stories manifested in me and my little brother playing pretend. As I got older, I started to write those things down. But I never wrote anything. I just wrote the idea of something. So, two people, J.K. Rowling, made me want to start writing because I loved the way that she wrote, and I loved holding a big book, and I just imagined my story ideas in a big book, and it just made me think. And then the other person who got me into writing was Taylor Swift. When I was 13 years old, Taylor Swift released her first single, and I fell in love with her. I've been a huge fan ever since, 13 years later, and her songwriting really inspires me, and the way that she crafts lyrics and how poetic she is in her songs and her poems, and even the way she talks and some of the articles that she's written. So I really like the idea of writing because of those two writers. One writes books, one writes music, but still. So I wouldn't be who I am without the Harry Potter series. So that's gonna wrap up my top 15 favorite series of all time. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and let me know if you agree, disagree. Give me your top 15 in the comments. Hit like if you like the video, and if you want to see more content from me, please hit subscribe. I definitely appreciate it. Tell your friends about me. Thank you so much, and you guys have a great day, and I will see you Friday for a reaction to Taylor Swift's new song, Lover, and I will see you next Tuesday with another book-related video.
Mwah.